No, I did this episode a bunch of times. I'll do it again just because I lost the first one. Ampex stands for AM. It stands for Alexander M. Poniatov Excellence. That's the company, the guy that invented analog tape. During World War II, I did this episode. Just skip it if you heard it before. During World War II, um, part of the reason why the Germans got so far with what they were doing, and America had an idea because we were somewhat in cahoots as far as technology goes, but the Nazis really used technology to almost win the war, to create hell on earth, and that's what they did. They used technology to do it. They used all forms of technology. They used V2 missiles. They were working on the bomb. Yeah, they were using television and media to whip people into a blind Nazi youth, Nazi Wolverine jingoistic death machine. What they were doing scared the shit out of the world because there was actually people that believed that they didn't, okay, like Hitler would give addresses over the radio. This is around the time of the wire recorder. The wire recorder is like angel hair sized metal, soft metal that you can write magnetic information to. It's the first tape recorder, and it was extremely high quality, and it still is. It's very high quality. Back then, during the war, all we knew was records, and you could listen to fireside chats over the radio, but you would naturally hear that they were from shellac or they were from cheap plastic records, one-offs, and they told you so. This is a recording. They would have recordings of Hitler giving addresses, like State of the Union addresses, to the people over in like Belgium when he was in Australia. And they couldn't keep track of where he was because they were using recordings. They were using the wire recorder, like a Norelco or whatever the fuck it was, wire recorder. We had the Norelco later. And so people thought he's got to be a time traveler. He's got to be, and the Allies thought that, we thought that too. He's got to be lying about where he is. Where the fuck is Hitler? Where in the world is Hitler? We hear him. He's just giving a live address in Belgium. We caught on first. Then after the war, we found out what a wire recorder was in the main industry of in the music industry. Bing Crosby was the first to spend almost half of his earnings, and Bing Crosby was an extremely rich man. He was this is pre-Sinatra. Okay? So he had a lot of fucking money. And what he loved to do best was play golf with the president, and he loved golf. And they had him doing so much fucking work that he found out about this thing called the tape recorder now, because now it's magnetic tape. It's not a wire recorder anymore. And he can pre-record his shit at home and put it on the Recording Company of America's broadcasts and be on the golf course. And they could rerun his shit. And he invested such stock into the Alexander M. Poniatov Tape Company. Ampex is for Alexander M. Poniatov Excellence Analog Tape. We can thank Bing Crosby for that. And we could, rock and roll can, rock, rhythm, blues, jazz, and soul can all thank Bing Crosby for that. And he revolutionized the recording industry by doing so. That's what Ampex means. They don't, I think you could still get We used to fuck with, I can't remember. I think it was inch tape. God, this is bad that I can't remember this. Yeah, it was inch, and sometimes I think we never got up to 2-inch tape, but it was inch tape, and the reels would cost back then $65. Now it's called the Quantigy Company, I believe. I don't know if Quantigy is around anymore, but if it's not, most people are buying used tapes. And you have to be careful with tape, the way you store it, because it collects mold really bad. And it can make you sick. You got to be careful how you store it. And sometimes if a tape is left too long in its spool, in the reel, they start to stick together, and it might pull off some of the adhesive. So when they go back to redo masters, they have to gently bake them in an oven at like 75, 85 degrees, sometimes more, and take it out periodically so the master tapes. That's the thing about the Pistols too, is I wanted to say, is like they did all those master tape MOG files for all those bands. If you notice, the Sex Pistols master tape it's not the master tape. EMI or whatever the company was that put that out, they still have that master. If they got the log books for it, they still got the master, but they probably don't want anybody having that. You said Apex. I didn't say anything about it. I said Ampex. Ampex. Whenever I see that Ampex logo, it brings me back to being fucking 9 years old and watching my father string together his reel-to-reels, his 7.5 inch per second reel-to-reels. By the time I was 19, we were using 15 inches per second inch tape, 8 tracks. The quality was astounding. It became not fun when we started using ADATs. It became a real fucking drag. And then we'd get paranoid and check the ADATs to see how much time was left on them, because they have like a time to die clock you can check on the ADAT, because yeah. But if you want to know the best sound I've ever heard, it is the marriage of digital, and this was a big thing in the 90s as tape was waning, was the marriage of, they called it DA, digital to analog. And we'd go to I find these cool studios we go to, because when I take my boys to the studio, I always take them to the best, the most scientific, and I would take over. I would let the engineer know I'm going to be touching the board, I'm going to be having, and they're cool with it as long as you pay. They don't really give a fuck. And I would go, and you'd record. Sometimes you'd experiment. You'd do 8 tracks of analog drums, and the rest digital, and sometimes vice versa. But the best sound I ever got, and I know that there's got to be somebody in the world that would agree with this, but it's so weird, was the sound of the 8mm. It was an 8. I think it was. Yeah, it was 8mm. It would record masters on 8mm tape digitally. It was a Tascam. I think it was called a DA88, Digital Audio 88. And it was half analog and half digital. And when you'd press play on it before the stick count, it was just creepy. It was like listening to it in real time. The quality was over the fucking top. Best sound I ever heard. My favorite studios were all the 8-track digital, and we'd get the weirdest studios. But that DA88 is a strange fucking hybrid that came out, and they used it for like 5 years or something, and it just gave the best fucking sound. Really, it did. And I think you can ping pong down. You can get as much as 16 tracks on there without losing any quality. And it sounded like digital should. It sounded like tape and digital. It was just beautiful. That's what that is. Those Ampex takes. The box used to be beautiful. It was an embossed box. It came with a plastic reel inside. Do you remember? I mean, I remember going to Radio Shack and getting realistic tape, which wasn't. There was a noticeable quality. It wasn't Ampex, but still, you could get there was nothing like paying $14 for a brand new box of 7.5 inch realistic tape or Ampex tape. I would steal my father's Ampex and tape over them because he had a library. He had a fucking wall. And, you could tape over those a million times. They run so fast. It's 7.5 inches. That's 2.5 times faster than a cassette. The faster it goes, the clearer it gets, the lower the low, the higher the high, the lower the signal to noise ratio, the lower mechanical noise of the tape looping, running through. And it was amazing. Like the first time I ever heard DBX, I couldn't believe it. And I started recording everything with DBX, and then when we mix down, we take it off. Because it was like a studio compressor. That's not an effect you'd find at your house. Is a mastering compressor deck. DBX was big. All that tape shit, dude. That luscious tape,